Dear viewers, now we move on to the Red Sea resort city of Sharm el-Sheikh, where the Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli takes part in a seminar about investment opportunities in Egypt. The seminar is held on the sidelines of the Islamic Development Bank's meetings held under the auspices of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. So, dear viewers, we're giving you live pictures and live coverage from the event taking place. Now, let's move on to the Red Sea resort city of Sharm el-Sheikh.
On this second day of the Private Sector Forum, the IsDB Group Private Sector Forum, organized by the IsDB Group entities concerned with the private sector, ISEC,
المؤسسة الإسلامية لتنمية القطاع الخاص والمؤسسة الدولية الإسلامية لتمويل الأعمال لمجموعة البنك الإسلامي للتنمية ثقة
the IsDB Business Group Forum, ثقة, and local government partners, particularly in Arab Republic of Egypt and all member countries. The first day witnessed addressing various topics related to the role of the private sector in the member countries, to support development recovery post-pandemic, and also issues of green financing and alleviation of climate change impacts and means of financing them. Today we start our proceedings with an interactive session between the private sector and the Egyptian government. We are honored by the presence of His Excellency the Egyptian Prime Minister in a dialogue about the most recent developments in the business environment in Egypt and the directions in Egypt towards private sector in the coming stage. On the panel we have His Excellency the Prime Minister, Her Excellency Dr. Hala Al-Said, Minister of Planning and Economic Development, and Dr. Nada Masoud, Minister of Planning Advisor and member of the Executive Board of Directors IsDB. For anyone who would like to address a question to His Excellency the Prime Minister, kindly start writing down your question. They will be collected and presented to His Excellency the Prime Minister shortly. Now we give the floor to Dr. Hala Said, the Minister of Planning and Economic Development. Thank you. Your Excellency, the Prime Minister, Dr. Mustafa Madbouli, dear colleagues, ministers, Your Excellencies, the heads of the regional and international development institutions, dear guests, I would like to welcome you all for the second time. Today, we have follow-up meetings of the IsDB group meetings, which we are honored to host in Sharm el-Sheikh in the Arab Republic of Egypt after 30 days since it was last held in Egypt. It is also, because it's the first time, it was important for us to hold a forum, a special forum for the private sector on the sidelines of these meetings. Why is that so? Because I and my colleagues and His Excellency Dr. Jasser and all the colleagues at the bank agreed that these meetings must witness a private sector forum for the first time for many reasons. The first reason being that all the member countries firmly believe in the importance of the private sector's role in the development process, particularly that IsDB, having started as a single institution, now has expanded and has become a group of development financing institutions supporting the private sector, contributing to facilitating trade, which in turn helps ensure investment and export credit for the private sector. The group in its current form helps and supports the role of the private sector in the member countries. So it was crucial for us to agree that there must be, in this wonderful gathering, there must be a three-day forum especially for the private sector, hosting a number of meetings between the government and investors. Also very important is that the Egyptian state today, under the external challenges and shocks that face the countries all over the world, the Egyptian state has passed through the first phase of economic recovery very successfully, and we started the second phase of structural reform, which emphasizes in all its aspects the importance of enhancing the role of the private sector in plans, in incentives, in directions, in policies that are followed by the state as related to the role of the private sector as a fundamental partner, as a major driver for the workforce in Egypt. Of course, we seized the opportunity of this wonderful gathering, bringing together investors, private sector and international organizations to invite and burden once again the Prime Minister for him to speak about the new directions of the Egyptian state in supporting private sector in terms of policies, procedures, incentivizing policies for such support, and to have this meeting. And I really do appreciate on your behalf his presence with us, and I would like to thank him sincerely for his presence despite his extremely heavy schedule that he has, for giving us an opportunity twice to meet with us. I would like to thank him and give him the floor.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. طبعا معالي السادة الوزراء
Your Excellencies, the ministers, distinguished guests, the honorable guests of Egypt, once again it is a true honor for me to be with you today. Allow me at the outset of this session before we start with answering your questions, which we are happy to answer, allow me to give a very brief introduction about the economic situation and the vision of the Egyptian state in addressing the coming stage.
الدولة المصرية الحقيقة اسمحوا لي العقد الماضي الحقيقة
Over the past decade, we have passed through extraordinary times in all aspects. We have gone through two revolutions in 2011 and 2013. They were very difficult times in terms of the political situation, the situation on the streets. This had major repercussions on the Egyptian economy and its indicators, its growth. And this is totally normal for any country that's going through political turmoil. The economy is affected, of course, and then also this is accompanied with concerns on the side of the private sector regarding expanded financing and investment. This comes in parallel with the fact that Egypt also has the challenge, the continuous challenge of population overgrowth. In that decade, Egypt was growing at a rate of 2 million additional people in the population. So you can imagine over the period of 10 years, the population in Egypt increased by some 22 million people. 22 million people could be the population of an entire country, or a number of countries combined even. So as such, you can sense the kind of challenge that the Egyptian state was facing in that period. And since His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi assumed office mid-2014, the state started to set a clear vision for addressing these challenges, the most important of which was to start rebuilding the state. And here, because we're talking about a phase through which the Egyptian state was suffering structural and major crises that could not allow for any development, especially the energy and infrastructure sectors. In 2014, there was a severe problem with the electricity sector. We had extreme shortage in the supply of gas. We had problems in water, sanitation sectors, roads, communication. So even to start thinking about having investors come, or even the local investors in Egyptian states, to have them expand their businesses, the challenge was always, where is the energy, where is the infrastructure through which we can start to operate? So the Egyptian state set a clear vision starting mid-2014 by adopting a number of national projects that focus basically on building a developed infrastructure that would enable all investors and the entire private sector, with the completion of that infrastructure, to come to Egypt and to engage powerfully in the development process and to participate in the development of the Egyptian economy. Egypt also faces a major challenge. Every year we need 1 million new jobs. So you can imagine that to provide such opportunities, what kind of investment, magnitude of investment do we need? So once again, since mid-2014, the national and infrastructure projects were seen as a way to cover the basic needs of the Egyptian population, but also these projects in themselves were creating major job opportunities. And indeed, we managed through the infrastructure projects to create 5 million jobs. All our youth were engaged in this. Also, the Egyptian state, in parallel with that, adopted an economic reform program with the IMF and international institutions since late 2016, and alhamdulillah, with the grace of Allah, we managed to, as witnessed by all institutions, we managed successfally to take the Egyptian economic back on the right track. And as I said in my statement yesterday, were it not for such economic reform, this state would never have been able to endure the situation, but with the grace of Allah, with those crucial steps taken by the Egyptian state, we were successful in continuing to have positive growth of the Egyptian economy. Egypt was one of very few countries around the world throughout the 2 years of the pandemic to have positive economic growth. All the countries in the world were shrinking, while we are among very few countries. We achieved 3.6 and 3.3% of growth in the 2 years of the COVID-19 pandemic. So as we were getting rid of the pandemic, we found ourselves facing a new crisis that caused shortages of supply chains, and now we face the Russia-Ukraine crisis. But we, as an Egyptian government, had a vision. As we were completing the national infrastructure projects, we were planning to start a new phase with the Egyptian economy by reviving the role of the private sector, to have it as the major driver of all development projects. Because it is in our view as a state that we were successful in completing the necessary infrastructure, but also we produced a conducive legislative environment that was required in that stage to enhance the investment environment and business environment. We had a suite of very important legislation, for example, amendments to the investment law, the investment zones law, which gives major incentives to have new institutions, SMEs development law, the competition protection law, and anti-monopoly. We had many laws that were produced to prepare legislatively for a new phase, I just want to reassure you that in spite of all these challenges, Egypt in the current financial year, in spite of all these problems, to this minute, in the 9 months of our current financial year, 2021-22, the growth that has been achieved is 7.8%. Our expectations, were it not for the Russia-Ukraine crisis, we could have achieved unprecedented rates of growth that have not been seen since 20 or 25 years. However, our expectations indicate that we will exceed 6% overall growth rate this financial year. All of this sends very important messages that we, as a state, have a dynamic, flexible, and global economy. We are 103 million people in Egypt, which is a huge market that encourages investment in the coming phase. Allow me to give you in a nutshell the vision for our coming phase.
We've started since the beginning of this year and with the Russian-Ukrainian crisis to take important, extremely important steps in order to encourage the private sector for it to come back strongly to the recovery of the Egyptian economy. The private sector, therefore, and all the non-Egyptian investors, therefore, also that are most welcome and who are encouraged to come to Egypt as a promising market. We have taken important steps, as I said, based on the orientations of Her Excellency the President of the Republic, and this was during last Ramadan. The Egyptian government held a press conference in which they declared the future steps that are going to be taken and be implemented. The first thing is that we've have a very important document that would clarify to the world and the private sector the role and the vision of the state and the government in the Egyptian economy in the future, and our main goal is to encourage, as I said, the return of the private sector to the Egyptian economy and to increase the share of investments from 30% currently to 65% of the entire investments in Egypt for the 3 coming years. And today, as part of this document, this important paper, there is a clear-cut vision of the sectors that are going to be involved in this vision. Let me tell you simply, because people might think that the state is going only to sell the enterprises to the private sector, which is not the case. There are other ways to do things. That is that, for instance, for infrastructure, the infrastructure is there and it is offered to the private sector to be used by the private sector, and all the amenities, all the facilities also are put at the disposal of the private sector. There are also other sectors that can be expanded, therefore, to increasing the capital of any of the major projects should be done entirely by the private sector, not by the public sector anymore. Administration and management also is given to the private sector. Maybe the Egyptian state also can sell some shares to the private sector progressively in order for it to gain more shares in these major projects. In any case, the state and the government will encourage the management and the operation of all these projects by the private sector. This is part of the sectors that the state is exiting from. Now there are other sectors also where the state or the government is going to exit progressively, gradually, and give it to the private sector. In other sectors, as I said, the sectors that are not interested, but that are not of interest to the private sector, these will be kept by the government. But at the same time, and having said so, there is a clear-cut strategy that has been crafted by the government in order to encourage and to increase the growth rates, industrial growth rates, because we believe that industrialization is the real challenge for Egypt And this is why we are lending it an extreme importance, because, and we saw that we discussed this matter with many entrepreneurs and businessmen, etc. And the most important thing is that we said that to grant industrial lands would be done, but we will only price or charge the facilities, not the lands. These are some of the facilities that we're going to grant to the private sector. This is to encourage the industrialization of the country. For those who are interested in industrialization, they will be granted lands, and there will be a unique a single commission or committee that will be in charge of this to grant the authorizations to the businessman. The investor will get this authorization, and then this committee will get all the other authorizations in favor of the businessman. There is also another very important article in the investment code, which is what we call the golden rule, that will be granted to the investors and the businessmen. And this is very important, and because it will contribute to the development of the Egyptian economy. Incentives also have been put in place, and we will focus in next time on renewable energy and green economy. During the last 2 months, we had 6 MOUs with international agencies for green economy on major projects, because Egypt will become, inshallah, a regional and a global center for a green economy and green energy and clean energy, because we have great potential for solar energy, and the Egyptian state is putting major incentives in order to encourage green and clean energy. Other sectors such as agriculture, ICDs, and of course high on our agenda. We are lending great importance to them. We've also taken a very important decision, that is to authorize the creation of companies, of businesses through the virtual arena. That is, that you don't need to be physically present to create an enterprise. You can create it virtually. These covers sectors and fields such as what is started by the youth, startups, etc. All these are measures and arrangements that have been taken by the government and myself and all my colleagues, the other ministers, about to implement them. We will also have a unit to solve all the problems of the investors, even though we already have this kind of entities, but this will be a particular entity, a particular unit that will handle all the problems that may be encountered by the investors in order to create a conducive environment for them. Of course, we still do have challenges when it comes to bureaucracy, but we are taking the appropriate measures in order to expedite the authorization grantings, etc. all these bureaucratic processes. And we hope that in the future, as I said, we experienced a very delicate period, but we have been able to provide and to create the legislative framework and the administrative frameworks, etc., that are bound to liable to improve the investment climate in the country. And I think that we will expedite this process in the future. And we, as the government, we have goals and objectives that are crystal clear and that will be implemented. And every 3 months we will hold a meeting and present the deliverables.
في النهاية يعني مصر
I'm not
بتفتح
going to
يعني
be
أبوابها
long,
بالكامل
but once again, let me
لكل
tell you
مجالات
that our
الاستثمار
doors
وبالذات
are
في المجالات
wide
اللي أنا
open to
أشرت
all
إليها
you, to all
اللي
the
إحنا
investors in
معتبرينها
all the
أولوية
sectors
أولى
that
إن شاء
I
الله في
mentioned,
خلال المرحلة
and that
القادمة.
we consider to be
شكرا لدولة
priorities. Thank
رئيس
you.
مجلس
Thank
الوزراء.
you. I thank the Right Honourable Prime Minister.
والآن نفتح المجال للحوار وستطرح الدكتورة ندى مسعود المستشار الاقتصادي لوزيرة التخطيط في مصر وعضو مجلس المديرين التنفيذيين للبنك الإسلامي للتنمية ستدير الحوار وتطرح أسئلة حضراتكم على الدكتور مصطفى مدبولي دولة رئيس مجلس الوزراء. فإذا كان هناك أسئلة أرجو من الزملاء أن يأتوا بها للدكتورة ندى.
questions, would you please hand them over to Dr. Nada?
كان هناك بعض الأشخاص نعم معهم أسئلة.
شكرا دكتور مصطفى. طبعا حضرتك وضحت تماما خطه الدوله والمجالات اللي هي
vision and the plans and projects of and the priorities of Egypt, of the Egyptian state. But I have a question on the priority sectors. You said that green economy and industry are top priorities. But do you have any specific sectors or fields in the industrial sector that you focus on, and what are the incentives that are
طيب احنا يمكن لما اتكلمنا على الصناعة يعني الحقيقة هناك القطاعات اللي يعني وضحت تماما ومن خلال جائحة الأزمة العالمية الحالية هناك قطاعات بعينها يعني لها الأولوية. قطاع زي الصناعات الغذائية وصناعات زي الأسمدة أيضا المرتبطة بها، قطاع الصناعات الكيماوية والبتروكيماويات، قطاع الصناعات الدوائية،
pharmaceuticals, and engineering. All these are priorities. ICTs as well of our priorities. I'm referring here to for instance, to electrical cars. We've started the strategy, crafted the strategy in this respect, and we are giving major incentives to investors in this sector, that is the electrical cars and vehicles. We have also green economy related sectors, and we consider that all these are extremely important for us. And among the incentives that we have, we've given a great number, as I said, of incentives, that is, for instance, granting industrial and agricultural lands, and we are preparing as well other incentives, maybe customs or tax incentives also in new industrial zones that will be created in the future. I'm referring here to, for instance, the new capital city, the canal, the Suez Canal region, etc. In all these zones or areas, there will be major incentives that will be granted, and this will be done in the coming future. And this is to encourage new investments in this new geographical zones that we consider to be very important for the development, the economic development. Thank you. Another question regarding desalination entities or units. Are you going to grant the entire sector to the private sector? We in Egypt, we are experiencing or facing a major challenge, that is the increase in demography, and of course the challenges regarding the water that come to us from the Nile for centuries. Now the challenge is the production of about 6 million cubic meters per day of water for the future period. Now, for the 5 coming years, we'll have some 3.5 million cubic meters, and the main goal is for us is to grant these projects, desalination projects, to the private sector. And we will have a clear-cut roadmap that will, and the plants, the desalination plants also will be clearly identified, and even and this will be for the creation of new stations or centers, but also the old ones. Now, the production of desalinated water, of course, will go through renewable energy, and this is why we have crafted a roadmap on various projects, and inshallah, and of course we obtained many proposals from businessmen who have been very interested in this project, and we are waiting to get the technical and the financial offers, and in the future we intend to produce 2 million cubic meters of desalinated water. And the other objective is, and of course, as I said, we are expecting the best bids and offers. The other question is the pharmaceuticals. What are the orientations of the Egyptian government regarding vaccines production?
الدولة المصرية الحقيقة لديها يعني خبرات هائلة في قطاع الأدوية، ويمكن عندنا شركات وكيانات كبيرة عملاقة
in terms of the production of vaccines, and we have major enterprises that are public or
دي موجودة، وشركات في قطاع الأعمال لدينا الشركة القابضة لصناعة الأدوية، ولكن في نفس الوقت لدينا صناعة خاصة أو قطاع خاص قوي جدا. احنا لدينا 150 مصنع
sector. We have 150 pharmaceutical plants in Egypt, and when it comes specifically to vaccines, through the public entities that we have, we started discussions with the WHO and other major institutions to make sure that Egypt becomes a center for the production of vaccines. At the regional level, and the WHO themselves said that Egypt is one of the few African and Middle Eastern countries that have important major infrastructure in this sector of the vaccine production. What we are doing today, and our goal is to provide the infrastructure that is required, that is necessary, all the plants, and offer partnerships with the private sector for the production of vaccines and for any other strategic goals that we have set to ourselves. Once again, we call upon the private sector and the businessmen who have a wealth of experience in this respect, in this field, to come and work with us, and we promise that we will give more incentives. There has been a declaration on
هل حضرتك ممكن تدينا فكرة عن الحجم التمويل المرصود لهذا الموضوع ودور القطاع الخاص فيه برضه؟
Sustainable Transport Means project. There is a fund that is a part of the strategy in order on the creation or the production of cars and vehicles, especially electrical vehicles, or as a transition natural gas fueled vehicles.
النقل الجماعي والنقل الخاص
have collective transport vehicles that already work with or are fueled by clean energy. And in the beginning of our strategy, we, as I said, focused on the electric energy, but these vehicles, this kind of vehicles are still very highly expensive. Therefore, for us to encourage the ownership of Egypt, the state has created a fund. Maybe
الرسوم
the
اللي
state will
بتفرض على بعض
contribute to
يعني
this fund
الاستخدامات او الانشطه اللي ممكن
for
تكون بتضر
specific
بالبيئه،
activities
بحيث ان يعني نقدر نجمع في خلال هذا
for us to
الصندوق
be able
المبالغ
to
التي
have the
تمكن
necessary
الدوله
funds
المصريه من
that will
دعم
enable the
السيارات
Egyptian state
زي بالذات
to
على الأخص
encourage the
السيارات
production
الكهرباء
of
او
clean
السيارات
cars
اللي
and
هتبقى بتنتج
vehicles.
بالكامل وتشتغل بالغاز الطبيعي، بحيث يبقى لدي آلية مستدامة تشجع هذه الصناعات. يبقى النهارده لما يجي قطاع خاص ويجي ينشئ مصنع للسيارات الكهرباء او حتى وسائل النقل الجماعي اللي شغاله بالطاقه النظيفه، هيبقى نقدر ان احنا ندعم بصوره مبدئيه الفرق اللي هيحصل ما بين قيمه السياره اللي بتطلع بالطاقه النظيفه مع السياره اللي بتطلع بالطاقه التقليديه. يبقى انا كده بخلق آلية لفترة انتقالية لغاية لما التكنولوجيات دي احنا شايفينها انها مع الوقت تبدأ قيمتها يعني تبدأ ترخص وتبدأ زي ما شفنا في أمثلة أخرى تبقى في نطاق السعر المنافس والمستهدف، وبالتالي دي كلها حوافز النهارده الدولة المصرية بتعملها عشان تسرع بتوطين هذه الصناعات في مصر إن شاء الله.
آخر سؤال بقى
The last question, because I know that
كتير من وقت حضرتك، في خطة الدولة لزيادة مصادر النقد الأجنبي، هل الاعتماد الفترة القادمة هيكون على الصادرات بشكل أساسي؟ وهل في أسواق بعينها الدولة ترى فيها فرصة واعدة لمصر الصادرات المصرية؟
الحقيقة ده برضو طبعا سؤال مهم جدا، لأن ده جزء من الخطة اللي أعلنتها الدولة المصرية في خلال الفترة القادمة. احنا طبعا كدولة يعني عايز أقول إن موارد النقد الأجنبي التقليدية اللي مصر كانت دايما معتمدة عليها، تحويلات المصريين في الخارج، الصادرات، دخل قناة السويس، السياحة. الحقيقة هذه القطاعات نمت بصورة يعني بمعدلات الحمد لله يا رب معدلات جيدة جدا. وبالرغم من كل الأزمات اللي مرت العالم بيها الفترة السابقة، ولكن شهدت يعني الفترة السابقة معدلات كبيرة لنمو هذه المصادر التقليدية. ولكن اللي احنا وجدناه ان الاقتصاد المصري ايضا بينمو بمعدلات كبيرة جدا، وبالتالي احتياجاته من العملة الصعبة بقت كمان ايضا بمعدلات عالية. عشان كده كانت الرؤية واللي الدولة وضعتها ان مضاعفة الصادرات المصرية في خلال السنين القادمة لتصل الى الهدف 100 مليار دولار. وده هدف محوري النهارده احنا كدولة بنعتبره النهارده يعني مش اوبشن، هو ما بقاش خيار، ده بالعكس احنا كدولة بنشتغل عليه بقوة كبيرة جدا. ولكن ايضا ونعي ان هذا الكلام بياخد مدى على الاقل 3 سنوات عشان يشتغل، لكن الدولة المصرية ويمكن ده كان يعني أعلن فخامة الرئيس عبد الفتاح السيسي في إفطار الأسرة المصرية في رمضان إن الدولة هتتيح جزء من الأصول بتاعتها اللي موجودة لدى الحكومة، وده كان جزء من اللي أنا قلته في وثيقة سياسة ملكية الدولة، هتتيح جزء من أصولها بما قيمته 40 مليار دولار، بحيث إن إحنا بنتيحه للقطاع الخاص إن هو يدخل ويعني ياخد هذه الأصول بمعدل 10 مليار دولار سنويا على مدار 4 سنوات. فده هيبقى $10 billion per year. This will be another source of foreign currencies. لتوفير موارد العملة الأجنبية. الحقيقة لدينا يعني خطة طموحة جدا لمضاعفة عوائد السياحة، وبنشتغل على هذا الموضوع. مناطق يعني سياحية لتيسير الإجراءات الخاصة بمشروعات السياحة، وبالذات النهارده فتحنا مناطق لم تكن يعني بتجتذب كسياحة دائمة زي الساحل الشمالي الغربي، والنهارده مدينة زي العلمين الجديدة الحمد لله بقت مقصد يعني سياحي ليس فقط سياحة محلية ولكن سياحة دولية، وبالتالي لدينا خطة أيضا لمضاعفة عدد السائحين المصريين في خلال ال3 سنوات القادمة، وبالتالي معناها أيضا مضاعفة العوائد من السياحة. والحقيقة برضو يعني الحمد لله كان المشروعات اللي اتعملت لتنمية قناة السويس وتنمية المنطقة الاقتصادية المحيطة ليها ابتدت النهارده يمكن لما اتعمل مشروع يعني ازدواج قناة السويس في 2014 2015
when we started the process of the reopening of the Suez Canal in 2014-2015, some would say that, okay, the Suez Canal is still there, is already there, it exists, but we need other sources. But we realized that today, for instance, the time required for any transaction or any operation on the canal is greatly shorter today. And this, alhamdulillah, is contributing, of course, in the increase in our resources in terms of foreign currencies. Thank you. Thank you, Right Honorable Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli. Thank you very much indeed. I thank the Minister of Planning and Economy and Dr. Nada Masoud, the Economic Advisor to the Minister. Thank you very much.